Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show, and every week I get to talk to smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of companies and organizations, ranging from, you've seen the archives, Netflix, Kinko's YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, Lending Tree, Open Table, lots of great guests and interviews that you can check out in the archives. This episode, of course, brought to you by Rise25, where we help B2B businesses get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. You can learn all about it at rise25.com. All right, my guest here today is Ryan Niddel. He's a CEO, board member, and entrepreneur. He's also an authority on improving revenue companies by improving their EBITDA. We'll talk about what that means. You know what that means through increased operational efficiency, lean manufacturing principles, and more. And he's helped with the acquisition or exit of more than 11 companies, helping their collective revenue surpass over $200 million. And he's tripled the revenue of more than 5 companies in about a 2.5 year period, adding an extra almost $1 billion in valuation of these companies. So we're going to talk about some of the secret sauce behind all of that. And he's currently a general partner in a private equity fund, sitting on the board of directors of several other companies. And I'm interviewing him from beautiful Salt Lake City, where he is visiting one of his portfolio companies. So we'll get into that. Ryan, such a pleasure to have you here today. And I always love asking people about how entrepreneurial they were as a kid. And I'd say maybe about half of my guests, surprisingly, considering I interview almost exclusively entrepreneurs, but half say, I didn't really do anything. And lots of them have stories of some kind of lawn mowing or shoveling snow, depending where they grew up. You were a lawn mowing kid, inspired by some Air Jordans you wanted to buy.
That's true. And thanks for the warm introduction and great greeting, John. I really appreciate being on the show. And you hit the nail on the head, right? I would say I was a forced entrepreneur. I can't even say accidental as a 10-year-old child where, right, I'm 39 years old, and I grew up when Nike Air Jordans were all the craze, and Tommy Hilfiger cologne was a thing that you had to have. And I came from a middle-class upbringing, and my parents, while they wanted to support me, they looked at what the investment or the expense of those two material possessions, said, you were just absolutely insane. We're never going to buy those for you. However, if you want to earn money, you're more than welcome to, right? You can use any of the resources available to you. And one of those was this old steel blue lawnmower we had. It wasn't self-propelled. It wasn't one of those nice Toros or zero turns, right? It was a big, heavy, it felt like 1,000 pounds back as a 10-year-old. And so I hopped on our computer at that point. I think I used Microsoft Word that was around back then. It's been obviously quite some time. I typed up some very basic flyers, lived in a nice middle-class neighborhood, and just went door to door handing out flyers, offering the opportunity to have me mow your yard at a flat rate, right? It wasn't some sort of crazy entrepreneurial venture. It was $10 flat per lawn. And if memory serves me correctly, I had somewhere between 7 and 10 lawns that wanted their lawn mowed every week. And so
nice recurring revenue there.
Yeah, right. You start it in spring and run it all the way through in the little town of Mansfield, Ohio, run it all the way through October, right? So good income for, 7 months of the year or so, where, doesn't take much to back into the math of 10 yards per week, 4.3 weeks a month over 8 months. I had the money for the Jordans. I had the money for the Tommy Hilfiger and a couple other things. But from that, oddly enough, my father was insistent upon the fact, John, that I saved back 30% of that money and invested in the market. I didn't make any sense at that point, but my father started just really pounding it into me. And I remember being so frustrated, John, of like, no, I want to go buy this other thing. He said, you'll thank me later. You got to pull off 30%. You got to invest in something that's going to make you some passive income. So simultaneously, I started investing in mutual funds at, 10 or 11 years old by no choice of my own, admittedly. I'd love to say it was some sort of stroke of genius and I was that brilliant, but I was forced to, but it worked out well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny because when I ask people about that, sometimes there are certain guests that then start hiring their friends to fulfill on that business that they're building. Did you ever do that? Did you ever get any friends to do the lawn mowing? Not a lot of margin in $10, I guess. So
there's not. And I wish I had that level of entrepreneurial insight or that level of mentorship to present that to me. John, that didn't even dawn on me at that time. It was like, gosh, it takes me 45 minutes to mow a lawn. I'm going to work about 8 hours a week. There's a lot more time than 8 hours, especially as a kid in the summer. So gosh, I can get that done, and I can get them done on the weekends if I need to. So I never thought about the scalability of pulling myself out and paying somebody else.
I mean, most 10-year-olds don't, right? It's like very rare, but it's always interesting to me when there are people that say that they, it's always something innate. Like, it's not like someone told them to do it. They just like kind of figured out oh, I can just have my friend do this. Yeah.
Leverage is an amazing gift when you figure it out.
Right. So one of your first businesses was a web company that you had. You had a couple of partners with it. You grew it and you ended up selling it around age 29. Talk about some of the growth trajectory of that during your 20s.
Yeah, that was such a wild time for me, John, where I didn't know what web hosting was. I came from a mechanical engineering background. I got into, of all things, running luxury car dealerships and got burnt out. I started looking around and saying, okay, I'm making the dealer principal independently wealthy, but I'm working 80 hours a week to make good money, but I really have 2 full-time jobs, and just was burnt out at 26, as funny as that may sound. And so stepped back and got the opportunity to come onto a startup web hosting company out of Akron, Ohio, as just a salesperson, right? Not anything special. And jumped in. It was
a bit of a step down then, it sounds like.
It most certainly was. It was a step down, not only from salary, but from understanding, from impact in the industry. And so stepped into this container, as I call it, with no knowledge of what web hosting was, no understanding of tech in any capacity, just had this belief in myself that I could sell anything to anyone. And came on board. We had 10,000 clients or so, and fairly rapidly figured out a true affiliate sales model. Where does web hosting fit in the general ecosystem? And back then it was people were looking to make money online or looking to create blogs. So I had the web team develop a little bit of a web builder that went out and scraped for data and created blogs that were industry specific based off what someone cared about, and taught them to go out and look for affiliate links and backlink them and how to drive some traffic to it. And very rapidly, John, we went from 10,000 clients to 2.5 years later, almost 600,000 clients. And I during that time period, I progressed from salesperson, affiliate manager, into CEO, and then managing partner of that. Bought out a couple of our partners, went through a couple capital raises, and then sold it off to a subsidiary of GoDaddy. Now, in saying that, the lessons from that time, John, were all accounting based, right? Here we are. I'm selling 5-year web hosting packages for, I'll say, $300. Admittedly, I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but we're cash basis in that moment. So we're looking at it like we're making $50 million a year in revenue. Right. We're worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Everything is going to be incredible. And we went to market and I got my teeth kicked in. I think I still have some dental work that needs done from how aggressively I was taught some of these lessons where, just the sheer fact of there's a liability that you really have for the next 5 years to service this client.
Yeah, got to fulfill it.
You see the cash in your bank, but you've really missed your revenue recognition is off. And so seeing all of a sudden, we're thinking it's a, $100+ million exit. And it turned into less than 20 million by the time we really backed into all the math and recalculated our books and did a more appropriate job of revenue recognition and all types of things that, it could be a whole nother show for hours on the power of understanding accounting and finance as it pertains to the small market business, where we just didn't know what we didn't know. I had what I thought was a good CFO, but I never had a really high caliber CFO to know what they did and didn't know. We didn't have our books audited by a third-party financial company to help us see some of the inefficiencies in what we were doing. We're a handful of entrepreneurs that are taking private flights places, able to buy anything we want to, and really living high off the hog, having a great time, but not doing anything to grow the enterprise value of the company. And we sold it, John, because the revenue started becoming inverted, and we as partners didn't see eye to eye anymore. And it was a thing of, on one side, it's really sexy to me to say, at 29, I sold my first business. But the real truth of the matter is we almost didn't have a choice, right? We weren't getting along as partners. We didn't see the vision the same way as a go forward. Our revenue recognition was off. Our burn rate on cash was pretty high based off of our revenue acquisition. And so it's like, gosh, let's just give this mess now to somebody else to clean up. And why not go to the strongest in the industry? Because we really, what created the value for us is we were intelligent enough to get a grant from the state of Ohio to build a data center above the casino in Cleveland that had just been built. And some really, really intelligent people on the team figured out some unique server provisions that create our own internal cloud infrastructure. That's really what provided the value for us. Is GoDaddy wanted access to that knowledge to create the cloud provisioning way before the AWS days, right? Way before.
Isn't that interesting though, that sometimes you sell a business and it's not what you think is the value of the business, that the acquiring business, the buyer buys you for something else?
It is. It absolutely is. And right, that really started to create this framework of, to me, the most impactful lessons I've learned have been from the things that I thought I knew that I didn't really know, right? It's those life experiences of skinning your knees and what to look for and what to step away from that have created some of these foundational elements that have went into, I'll call it the success over the past handful of years. And then with success is to be self-interpreted.
Looking back on that period of time in your life, it sounds like there's a few things you would have done differently. Maybe had a third-party auditor, had a different CFO. What are a few things that you can identify that now, looking back on it, you wish you'd done differently?
I wish I would have sought outside counsel from someone, right? A coach, a mentor, someone that had been there before. I wish that I had spent more time focused on the business and less on the ego of what the business was providing me. Right. I just call it living high off the hog and looking at, okay, if we generate this much revenue and this much net income, it equates to this much in my pocket versus if there's that much net income, how can I turn that into an enhanced multiple for the business? Because I'd be playing a longer term game. I didn't have someone, and admittedly wasn't open to seeking it. Right. It was this thing of, well, gosh, I'm 28, 29 and everything's working flawlessly. Why would I need insight from anybody else? Which is a completely different way that I look at the world now versus back then. And then the power of having people on the team that have that, have a skill set that's past your own, right? I mean, to me, I truly believe that hiring key personnel with an experience in their specific role is paramount for the growth of a business, where at different seasons require, to me, different hires, where it's great to train people up as you're growing. Then it comes to a certain point where that just becomes inefficient and you're better to backfill with someone that's already been through the next season that's coming on to help pull you along through that and educate the team around them. And we never got to that point. Well, let me rephrase that. We should have been there. We were there mathematically. We were there revenue-wise, but not there from an ego standpoint.
Right. That's a hard one. I see people make that mistake a lot. So after you sell the business, it doesn't go any better. Talk us through that. You end up basically spending everything you've made and then some, and ending up in debt within a couple of years.
I did. So again, that ego, which to me, I look at it, we have a big E and a little e. The big E, that big ego that the outward world sees of look at how great I am and look at how magnificent everything I do has. And that little e is that internal level of confidence. Well, my big E was huge, right? To the outside world, I know everything. But inside, the little e for me was not even remotely formed yet. I had no level of confidence or certainty in myself. And so I go out and start a high-risk merchant processing company, processing credit card payments for online transactions in the gambling world and some of the things that are very risky, right? High chargeback propensity, lots of refunds. But I saw during the web hosting days, the banks, the merchant processors were the ones that were always guaranteed to make money. So, well, gosh, I should just go start that. I can leverage my wins. I can get my own ISO. I can stake my own money against it. So I take more risk, but I get more reward. And at that point, John was just convinced I knew everything. So as I'm building out the infrastructure, the team to support me, I didn't bring on a quality CFO. I barely brought on, at best, a generalist in accounting, at absolute best. I focused really heavily on sales and marketing and almost none on operations and finance/accounting. And so you go through the next, probably 16 to 18 months. And it was December 21st. I walk into the office and right at that point might have had 8 to 10 employees and had to unfortunately let everybody know that this was it. This is the end of the road. The business was defunct.
Was there a breaking point? Was there a straw that broke the camel's back that finally convinced you that you needed to shut it down?
There was when my personal bank account and the business bank account were both at zero. I said, well, gosh, I'm not going to go out and, try to raise some debt to make this happen. I'm going to have to just throw in the towel. And even then not really admit defeat, just throw in the towel for a minute. I wasn't able to, or refused to face the reality of the situation, which was, it was my fault, right? I was looking at, well, if, this affiliate did something different, or this person that owned this company did something different, I'd be in a different situation. I mean, John, I had to write a multiple 6-figure check to Visa and MasterCard just to shut down the business at the end of the cycle. And so, so much of it was people, processes, and then self that I just refused to be open to, right? I just thought I knew everything. So at 30, just about into my 31st year, I'm sitting there with no money left in the bank. The business is defunct, no employees sitting around, and somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 in debt. And zooming back 18 or 24 months before, it's private planes and Michelin restaurants and everything is magical. To truck repossessed, rental properties in foreclosure, and nothing there.
What do you? I'm a little bit fascinated with this. what people do to rebound when you have nothing, when you've hit flat bottom. What did you do? Did you get a job somewhere? What did you do?
I did. So was just burnt out with the internet. In my mind, it wasn't the internet was going to go away. It wasn't something like that. It was, okay, web hosting worked, but it didn't really, because, we didn't pay attention to the ratios. This internet landscape that I had a merchant processing business in didn't work out for me. So I'm going to get back into what I refer to as hand-to-hand combat, right? I knew I could sell. And I looked at it and I said, okay, I can go back and sell cars, but now I'm going to have to eat crow because I left that industry kind of on the high side. I'm going to have to admit that I completely failed to jump back into this. And gosh, my ego is not going to allow me to do that at all. So my girlfriend at that point, who's now my wife, her brother was getting married. So I had to go get a suit for the wedding, and found somebody to make a custom suit for me, and said, I'm in between opportunities right now. Would you mind teaching me this craft? Would you hire me as a salesperson? I know I can sell stuff. I said, yeah, there's really no risk for me. I already have the fabric book sitting around. If you generate income, that's great. And if not, I'm not out anything. Of course, I'll teach it to you. And so he taught me the art, I'll say, of haberdashery and what it was like to travel the country and literally sell custom clothing to wealthy individuals. And
God,
so
how like old school is that? I mean, that's like a profession that's been around forever and probably isn't going to go away even with the internet. Correct.
And as I looked at it, John, Columbus, Ohio has a level of wealth, but many individuals there didn't care much about. Joseph Banks was a fine place to buy suits, and I'm not disparaging what it would be like to buy from Joseph Banks. I've done it before myself, but I had to go to towns, cities like New York City, Chicago, some wealthy suburbs of Southern Kentucky, out here in Salt Lake City. But I didn't have the money. I couldn't fly. So I would hop in this 98 Cadillac sedan DeVille. It was tan with a tan leather bench seat in the front. It burnt oil like crazy. And I would get in my car at 2:30 in the morning and drive to New York City. It's about a 9-hour drive. Oof. I would meet people from noon until 6 p.m.
How did you meet people? How did you set up appointments?
Yeah, so it was a lot of referrals, but really a lot of social media impact. So I wasn't buying traffic. I didn't have some sort of great sales funnel. It was, I call it a level of guerrilla marketing. It was very intentional, consistent posting on social. It was finding the small centers of influence in those towns that I started a conversation with. It would say, hey, if you can get me in front of 4 or 5 people that would be interested in at least having a conversation, when I come to town, I'll invest in making you a sport coat on my dollar, right? So it was using those micro circles of influence. And then the name started to precede me, and not myself, right? But the business itself, because I would come and I would measure you in person. I'd lay out everything. I'd educate you. Then I came back and hand delivered it 45 days later. So I was getting those multiple touch points where once a first order came through, people started to feel really comfortable and started to bring more and more clients. And so every 45 days, I'm driving to, New York and back, Chicago and back, Southern Kentucky and back. And the business is growing for me personally. But in that, John, I couldn't help but notice some inefficiencies to it, where I'd be tired and I wouldn't put in my order for 2 or 3 days. I would transcribe or transpose numbers, right? Because I'd written them down the wrong way or read them the wrong way. Yeah. So I reached back out to my old web hosting cohorts and designed an app that would take a picture of a body, cross-reference versus measurements against a standard deviation, and would allow me to not only ensure that the order was put in the right way, but also that all the fabric codes and everything was put in immediately. So all of a sudden now this cash to cash cycle that could extend out as far as, as many as 18 weeks is now being cut down to 4 to 5. And so the value proposition starts spinning of, okay, now my cash is coming in a lot quicker. So I'm a lot happier. Customers are happier because their suits are coming in quicker. And I take this app to the gentleman that taught me this business. I said, look what I built. This is great, right? That's foolish. We don't need this.
No.
Paper works fine. Email works fine. We're never going to use that app. I said, well, okay, like I'm going to have to go out on my own then, right? I believe in this so much. And so I was able to use that app to leverage a relationship with a wool manufacturer to get a small piece of equity in a wool company in exchange for utilization of the app and branding the app into their platform. And so it allowed a whole different level of scalability, where even now, last time I looked, there's somewhere between 13 and 1,500 haberdashers across the country still using this app. It pays a very, very small royalty. But it was just an exciting season of time to then take all those lessons and go build my own company. Yeah.
I mean, it goes to show you some of these really old school industries that have been around for hundreds of years. They still aren't leveraging some of the tools and technologies that are available to us. And these opportunities are everywhere, really. Yeah.
They are. And it's thinking about what we're thinking about, as I say it. It's just because we've done something one way for so long It's being able to take that one step back and say, is there anything we could do differently? Why have we chosen that way? Is there any other way we could choose?
Right.
And just being really open to the possibilities that can exist, especially with, like you said, some of these very classic, what I'll call very boring businesses that haven't yet had a level of leverage from technology, from people to create a level of scalability. There's a lot of those hidden gems, right? The Warren Buffett cigar butts, those little things, just a little bit of extra room left. Well, there's a lot of extra room left, plus consolidation in marketplace, from acquisitions, whole nother conversation we can have that just create that enhanced multiple of earnings for a company.
I do want to talk about acquisitions because that's a goal of ours for our company this year. We put out a podcast episode about it recently. Before we get into that, though, still on this topic of one thing you point out, which I want to highlight, is that you have to be with the right people, and it sounds like the haberdasher who helped get you from A to B when you were rebounding didn't want to go to M or Z with you. And so, it's a choice, right? You then went and you found the wool manufacturer, found someone that was a little more innovative, a little more open to adopting technology. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was unceremonious. Right as I left the company, I felt like we parted on good ways. And then as we go through life, John, I'm about 12 months down the road, maybe 14 or so, and I get served this nice legal document that's an infringement upon a non-compete, which didn't actually exist and never signed it. But it was this thing of, right, everybody wants to see you succeed only to the point that you're not interfering with them or succeeding past the level of their success. And it was one of those things where I wrestled back and forth with what's honest, what's ethical, right? Because I give so much value to this individual who taught me this business. I mean, he's still got a great place in my heart. But as I look at it, it's like, well, gosh, I presented everything I could to you, and you said no to this. So what ended up happening, John, is I ended up saying, okay, I'm doing an owner finance deal to my head of sales. I'm going to step out of this, right? There's no point in shutting down this business because it's working, it's thriving. I'm going to pull myself out of it. And a non-compete is very difficult to enforce in the state of Ohio, especially, right, with all the different things that go into it, and just stepped away from it. Right, I stepped away, right, I sold it, but owner finance is my head of sales, and he created a new corporation to hold the IP to it, and here we sit today. God,
that's got to be such raw emotions to have been through that with that person, and then end up in a legal dispute with them.
Absolutely, right. Yeah. But it taught that even taught me lessons of, right, how do I want to show up? If I'm in that same situation, how would I show up? Right. At one point, it was anger, it was frustration for me, it was confusion. Then I'm sitting there saying, okay, I can kind of see it from his side for a second. Here I am, I come in, he's generating income off of my work, and I respect that. That's the way that industry works. He's taught me a tremendous amount. He's a person that has, again, a tremendous impact in my life. And all of a sudden I'm out on my own, and in his mind, I could have been, which I was not, but I could have been stealing clients that were proprietary to his business, right? Clients that I met during the time I was with him, which that makes sense to me. In the business I'm in now, people leave our company, they try to take our customers, they try to do all these things. And I do have to, put that flag in the ground for a second and say, whoa, hold on. We can't do that. You can go create your own enterprise. I want you to be successful, but you can't take my clients with you. So I get where it comes from.
Right. All right. You're in all these different industries now. So you've got a beverage brand, you've got a manufacturing business, you've got a roofing and solar company. How do you end up in all these different industries from there?
Yeah. So really good question. I back out of the haberdashery business, right, as self-proclaimed. And at that point, CBD was this new trending thing. People didn't really know what CBD was, at least the mass market. It was late 2015, early 2016. And so I jump into CBD, and I grow the CBD company direct to consumer from 16 to December of 2018. And I sell it off to a private equity group out of Pittsburgh. And in that, I'm sitting around after 2018, really into 2019, saying, I have no clue what I'm going to do next. I'm not independently wealthy enough that I can retire, but I've got enough that I can breathe again. I'm not panicked with where the income's going to come from the next month. But what do I want to do? And so I launched a podcast, right, which was just me.
Naturally, right? What you do.
Yeah, of course. Right. But it was me airing what I'll say was all my dirty laundry. It was the things you're not supposed to talk about that I was so petrified, John. I'd be successful later in life, and someone would bring up the fact, well, you failed at this business, or you did this thing that was wrong. And I said, gosh, I might as well just share my version of the story so I can be in front of it. It was very cathartic to get it all out.
Wow.
What that ended up leading to, John, was Eventually 120, 130 episodes in, it was 7 days a week. It was very short form content. And I just put an offer and said, if there's anything I've ever been through, anything I've shared that you think I could help you with, just send me an email to my personal email address. And John, I wake up, I think it was 2 days later, might've been 3, and I had 1,400 plus emails in my personal email box of people asking for various things.
Wow.
No sales funnel, no process, no business at all, no anything, just sharing. It's okay. There's something here. There's something here to be open to. And so eventually turned that into a consulting business where it just so happened that some of the people that had reached out were interested in all the things I did wrong, right? What did I do wrong during the exit of the web hosting company? What did I do wrong during the merchant processing business? What did I do wrong during the CBD exit? Because they want to learn that as they wanted to exit. And so that led to this season of life of, I'll say it was consulting. I don't even know what the right term would be. I was having conversations with business owners that were burnout, that were stressed, that, look, I just don't want to do this anymore. What are my options? How do I navigate these waters? What should I do next? And I started to create this path, this process that I found to be very consistent across businesses, right? And it caused me to start looking at business in just an incredibly simplistic form, that every business to me is marketing, operations, sales, and a level of finance or accounting, right? It's just very, very basic. And as you look at building out a business, I'm an entrepreneur that wants to grow marketing and sales because revenue is really fun and sexy to me. But if you look at it like a table, well, all of a sudden now your food's sliding off the table because 2 legs are really high and 2 legs haven't grown at the same time. And so starting to acknowledge that not only does that matter when you're growing and scaling a company, but also matters during an exit, because you need to shore up those vulnerabilities for the next buyer. Yeah. And if I look back over the seasons of what I had sold before, I didn't do a good job of creating SOPs that were clearly documented that somebody off the street could come in and execute at a level of efficiency. I didn't do a great job in shoring up the books and really making certain that they were dialed in for success for the next owner. And this led to this understanding of, I'll call it, small market business growth, of being able to come into a business that's, $2, $3, $4 million a year in annualized revenue, and having a very clear path to, about 100 million in revenue. That there's just seasons that businesses grow through, right? From 1 to 5 million for me, from 5 to maybe 10 to 15, then up to 25, then 50, then 100. And every different business has a different season to it. And the seasons, while there might be small nuances to what are the changes, they're ultimately the same, right? Business to me is, I'll say, consistent. Now, again, every business has a nuance to it. My beverage company has its own nuances with supply chain and issues with personnel that an educational-based company doesn't have, right? There's no physical product. But nonetheless, the scalability issues are the same. They're just masked in different containers, right? If you're coaching and educating people, you're going to have to backfill with the right level of mentors to help educate the people, right? There's going to be a heightened level of customer support that's needed. There's going to be variables to expenses you're going to have to monitor and measure. And so that's that lean manufacturing, right? That Kaizen, that incremental improvement, that dedication to this small incremental tweaks consistently. And that's been applicable across any vertical I've found so far.
How did you get into acquiring companies from consulting?
Yeah. So after, I don't know, the 8th, 9th, 10th company that I walked hand in hand with them through their season of transition, started scratching my head and saying, the consulting income's good, right? This is great, but I'm not getting anything from the exit, right? Which is fine. I don't know that I deserve something, but it just dawned on me that this has kind of been a system that I've developed. Let me go back and talk to the gentlemen that and ladies that I've helped them sell their business, and ask them if they'd ever be interested in contributing to the acquisition of a business, right? Being a passive investor, which then led into, well, gosh, there's all
so going back to your clients and saying, what if we were to invest in the process that I helped you with in acquiring another business? Okay.
100%. Because these exits, John, were anywhere between 5 million and 200 million that I had walked side by side with people in. And so 10 of the people said, absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. I said, well, hold on, before there's any sort of money that exchanges hands, let me make sure that you're protected. Let me understand this other level of the game, right? I'll call it that micro PE world. I guess it's officially PE with, right? How do you become SEC accredited? What are all the proper procedures you have to go through? How do you make certain that you're operating in an ethical and honest way? Because these are people that are friends now. Not only would I never want to burn somebody, but now these are people I have a really intimate, close relationship with. And so that's how it came to fund structuring and understanding what goes on with that. And right, just the capital pledges from these past individuals that, allow me to be in a place of course, you have the courses out there now that might teach you how to buy a business with no money out of pocket. And there's all types of different ways to structure acquisitions, but I prefer the more traditional mode of a business has an intrinsic value to it. If I can invest in it or buy all of it with cash, it's the most efficient way to do it.
Yeah. What's your favorite structure? I've been reading a lot of books on this topic recently, but, are you looking for, the baby boomer who's just done and wants to walk away and, you only insist on, seller financing, or, what's your means of structure? If you have an ideal situation, how do you structure it?
Yeah, really good question. So my ideal structure right now has been finding businesses that have just hit a plateau, right? And the plateau, I like a business that's at least been around for 4 years. I think if you look at the trends that are available online, you start to see these tranches in which businesses might have to shut their doors. And there's some places where they're indicative of continuation. And that 4-year mark seems to be where it starts to flatten out quite a bit, where you're not having these businesses necessarily shut their door. I like what I refer to as accidental entrepreneurs, as founders and owner operators. Ones that maybe didn't get an MBA, that didn't plan on this, that were probably a salesperson before, jumped into the role, have been successful, right? They're not hemorrhaging cash. I don't love turnarounds myself personally. I like things that are established, that are cash flow positive. I like to go in and physically talk to them and get to understand what's important to them. Are they looking for cash right now? Do they want to be a part of something bigger on an exit? And structuring those true win-win deals where quite often it's a combination. Look, as someone that has sold businesses before, if your business is worth 5 times, net income, EBITDA, however you want to look at it, well, sir, it wouldn't make sense for you to sell your business with 100% owner finance with a 5-year repayment, because you'd make the same amount of money if you just held onto your business, right? I couldn't ethically say that makes sense. What I could do is say, what if I paid you 2 times multiple right now? What if we structured some sort of hybridized deal where there's another 2x multiple that we pay out over, maybe it's 18 months or 24. I'd like to use the cash flow of your own business. And let's leave that 1x multiple for either balloon payment at the end, or if I sell off the company again, which is my ultimate goal, you get a taste again on the backside. If you'd be open to that, you can choose at that point. And that's been a really nice structure for me, where it seems to align the goals, where I'm not looking to take the keys to somebody else's castle and have them completely walk away. I like there to be a nice transition period. I like there to be an indoctrination period, right? Where this company has been established. It has its own culture. It has its own feel to it. And there has to be this, changing of the guard. I'm not the corporate raider type of person that's going to walk in and say, well, I've got the keys now. You're fired, and you're fired because I want to increase net margin. It's really quite opposite of that. It's how can we rally people around this new direction we're going? Because what I found is most businesses that reach that level of stagnation, and stagnation to me isn't a negative word. A business that does $6 million a year in annualized revenue at a 15% net margin is still a great business to own, right? People are making good money from that. But if you've been there for 2 or 3 years, or even, a year and a half, you're craving something more. There's something else out there, but you haven't figured out what it is. And so I found you can dump a little gas on that fire and get people reignited and reinvigorated. That it's a good win-win for everybody involved.
Let's talk about some of the different businesses you've been involved in. So one that's interesting, simply because I've had a bunch of conversations with these types of companies, is a roofing company and solar company. There are different approaches in the industry. There are roofing companies and there are solar companies, and there are some companies that provide both. And it sounds like what you've been doing is involved in a roll-up where you're acquiring different companies that do both of those things. Talk about some of those challenges around that.
Absolutely. So John, being in Columbus, Ohio, is primary residence for me, is home base for me. Right, we're in this nice little, I'll call it storm belt, where we're not in Tornado Alley down the center of our country, but we experience hail and wind storms and inclement weather that actually insurance companies will invest in replacing your roof if it meets certain criteria, typically 10 years or older, hail damage, wind damage, there's things going on with it. And so when I started to understand that that's how that world works, now you have a business that essentially is cash flow positive from the start, because you can go out, you can spend time with homeowners. You can see the fact of, oh gosh, they very clearly have damage. The insurance company pays you, 50, 60, 70% to start the job. So now your materials, all your profit comes in what we refer to as that second check, the check upon completion of the job. So you're not on any cash to start the process. And it's this nice way to start to gain trust with the homeowner. Well, in this industry, I'm certainly not the first person to figure this out in Ohio, but again, these accidental entrepreneurs, they do a really good job of 0 to maybe 2.5 or 3 million, and then it just stops. And you ask them for their books or their accounting, and they give you access to their bank account, maybe an Excel spreadsheet. Like there's been no revenue recognition. There's no controls put in place. And it's like saying, oh gosh, right? At some point, you're probably nervous about falling off a roof. You're probably nervous about what happens when there's no storms. What happens, all these things. would you be interested in a potential exit? And a handful of people say yes. Simultaneously looking at, those sunshine states. You look at even Southern Utah, you look at Arizona, you look at Nevada, where solar is kind of in that same environment where, gosh, people want to lower their energy expense. There's some good governmental aid programs and grants that exist, and saying, okay, if we could have roofing on this side and we could have solar's not as prevalent in Ohio, of course, right? We're not quite as sunny as we'd like to be. Now, all of a sudden, you have these two verticals that are running in parallel. What happens when I combine them? And there's a strategic play where there's a publicly traded entity that is a solar company that said, hey, when you reach this amount of EBITDA, we'll buy you for, a very specific multiple of earnings. And that multiple of earnings is a great arbitrage where I can pay really, really fair, if not even top dollar, to these small market roofing and solar companies, make a really healthy, variance between the two for creating systems, processes, and standardization across the board, which is just, I call it that lather, rinse, repeat process. It ends up being a variable of the same over and over and over again. And so it's an intentional sprint. It's saying, okay, the market's only going to stay where it's at for so long, and that multiple over time, depending on the dry powder that exists, right? The free cash in those coffers of that publicly traded company, only going to exist for so long. So let's really push that forward in a very intentional way with a team to support it. And it's been a really fun and exciting way to just look at again, those boring businesses, a service-based business that you sit around and look and say, man, why would anybody want to own that?
Yeah.
Well, it's a business that runs at, 20, 25% net income margin. You combine enough of them together, you pick up another 5 points because of the consolidation in your cost of goods, right? You're going to standardize accounting, you're going to standardize marketing, you're going to standardize sales. So now all of a sudden you get that incremental growth across the board on every one of those verticals. Then you got somebody on the backside who will buy it for 3 times more, 4 times more than that I'm paying for it. And everybody's happy, right? It's a good win for everyone.
Yeah, that's an amazing opportunity. There's another one you're involved in. This is a company that was doing $30 million a couple of years before you came in across it, and some people were talking about shutting it down. We were talking beforehand before we started recording about how you love these sorts of little diamonds in the rough. Take us through that one.
Yeah, so this is one of those fun lessons, right? This to me is more impactful than anything else. There's a business which I'd like to remain nameless, right? There's no hard feelings, but I think sometimes when we have those misgivings, we have those shortfalls. I think it's the entrepreneur's decision on how they want to share that story. But there's a company that specialized in sales and marketing that was a $25 to $30 million annualized revenue company, very rapid growth, very charismatic, very large scale, and I got brought in late 2021, right? Or late 2022, I'm sorry, about a year ago. And in coming in, I'm seeing, okay, they're kind of these same things that I've experienced. The revenue recognition process is way off base. The standardization of HR and controls aren't there. There's no onboarding and hiring process. These trailing liabilities. These incredible founders have determined that if we take all the money out of the bank account every month, we think our employees are going to work harder. So they're taking distributions of 95% of the net income every month. And I come in and say, they're asking me to help them get ready for a structured exit. Right? Beautiful. Would love to. And I'm going through, and my process is, to me, very simple. It's very logical. I just walk in, I get to be the dumbest guy in the room for a long period of time. What are you doing? How long have you been doing it for? Why'd you do it that way? Have you tried anything else? And it's literally the entire process through the business. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just an understand where someone's at. And I'm going through this and over again, nobody can really come up with a good amount of logic other than the founders said we had to do it this way. Okay, well, I'm open to that. So then I interview the founders and they say, yeah, we just thought that was the best way to do it. I said, okay, well, your revenue is on a downward trend. You built this shrine to yourself, big offices, big burn rates. You're going to hit a financial cliff in the next 4 months. There's something that's coming, that the trends show it that way. You're crazy. That'll never happen. We'll just sell and market more. Yeah, I hope so. Right. But the FP&A would show something a little bit differently, right? You really start to dive into the financial trends of a business and it tells a story. And I'm sharing it with them and in helping try to install systems and processes, even just how to run meetings and are things documented and structured in a way that that information gets disseminated across an organization. And we hit that cliff, and there was nothing left at the end of the cliff. There's no more runway. They're saying, okay, well, now what do we do? I said, well, it's very challenging to sell a business that's inverted on cash flow, that doesn't have a moat around it from an IP level protection. You don't have any patent things pending. You really have built this mechanism that isn't all that proprietary now. We might be able to sell off some legacy data, but you're talking pennies on the dollar. I said, well, we don't want to do that. What other choices do we have? Go out and raise debt, leverage some things back in, consolidate down, get lean and mean, bring on an equity partner or capital funding partner. Well, we don't want to do that. Okay, well, you guys can fund in then. You're the owners can fund back into the business. Well, our money's tied up in other places. Well, we're kind of at the end of the options I have in front of me right now on how we could do this. So we agree to part ways. Fast forward 3 or 4 weeks later, and they shut down the business. All the staff, they walk away from the lease. And so you have this incredible business that was, 10 or 20 million up to 30 million that then 18 months later ceases to exist. And so much of it, right, was at almost the same timing. They were a little bit younger, the entrepreneurs were, and not that age is indicative of success. But I remember so much of the ego that they were sharing at that point in time was the same ego I had at 29, 30, 31. I'm like, guys, I promise I've
been through this.
I know what you're going through. Nah, we'll figure it out. Okay. And it's the old conversation to me, John, that success swings singles. Quite often to me, we look for this big, massive home run to save the business, alter the trajectory. It's the atomic habit type of conversation. It's the small incremental changes. It's the minute details done consistently for long enough that alter the trajectory of the business. You're not going to come in and create some magic sales funnel that's going to dig you out of a deep hole you're in. The first way to get out of the hole is to stop digging, right? And it's a novel concept, but it's just proven to be true over and over and over again. When a company's hemorrhaging cash, stop for a second and analyze, what do we actually need to spend our money on? The next sales funnel is probably not going to create your next windfall. So,
I'm mindful of the clock because I know I like getting my guests out on time when I promise to end on time. So these have been great stories. Ryan, I know you have a new podcast that's coming out. So why don't you plug that? And then where else can people go to connect with you and learn more about you?
Thanks, John, so much. So new podcast coming out is called Rethinking Business. It's going to be on every platform, right? And Rethinking Business, it's not a lead generation for a sales funnel, although I appreciate that. I just feel compelled in the season of life that these stories that I'm sharing, the lessons on the macro and on the micro, I hop on the mic. It's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday show. They're short form. It's 20 minutes or less of just, hey, I thought I should go this way. I ran into a wall. I decided not to knock down the wall and think about things differently. Here's the tools and systems that I use to go through that. And here's the outcome that I'm chasing right now. So no call to action with that. Then the other side, it's just Ryan Niddel, RyanNiddel. It's on every platform, right? So it's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. It's always me behind the scenes. It's responding to your messages and would be honored to connect. And if there's any information that I have or resources I built, you're more than welcome to them.
I'm glad you're getting back on the podcast train because, you mentioned earlier that you got that massive result, kind of started a new business, the 1,400 emails or whatever that you got. And I can't tell you how many times I talked to people that started a podcast and then stopped it at some point. And if you deconstruct it, they got some huge win from it, right? Like helped their business in a dramatic way. And yet they stopped for whatever reason. So I'm glad you're getting back onto the horse, so to speak. Ryan, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, John. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.